Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the tier list for 11-18. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Starts around midnight Eastern Standard Time every night. And that's on Twitch now, not on YouTube. I still have some people from YouTube coming over saying, oh, I didn't know you were on Twitch. So I'm on Twitch. So be sure to go by, check that out, midnight to 3 every night, Eastern Standard Time. We are still going to release YouTube content, and I would like to do a lot more of that once I get kind of caught up in my classes a bit here. It's been a really wild semester so far. But we will be doing more of that. So I'm going to have released a patch notes video before this comes out. Then you have this one, and then I'll probably do an AD carry video over the next couple of days, and I might do some more rolls as well. So be sure to check all that out. I'm going to try to get back on the Warhammer train as well, start releasing more content with that, and then I'm going to be raiding Burning Crusade. We're going to be doing the Serpent Shrine Cavern and the Eye, so some of the new raids that are coming out next week. I'll be doing that probably on Wednesday and Thursday, starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then hopefully we will stop and transition over to League around midnight or 12:30 on those 2 days. So if you just want to come by and hang out and chat, you can check that out as well, or if you do like, World of Warcraft or Burning Crusade or whatever, then obviously come by and check it out. We might do some Final Fantasy XIV content in the future as well, especially once that new content drops here in a couple of months. So I have been sort of doing a little bit of that on the side as well. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get in here. So the meta has shaken up a little bit, I think, as you can see by the tier list. I still believe that Rakan is going to be the strongest. And another quick aside, what I would like to do eventually is just say really quickly what the champion is, maybe just spend like 3 to 5 minutes on some of these top-end picks, and then have a link to like a 10 to 15-minute guide that you could watch if you want more information about that. I don't have that set up yet, but that's my goal kind of for the future, is that there would be, a little like pop-up link over here, a little card you could click on if you wanted to go watch a Rakan guide or, Leona guide or whatever. I'll see if I can set that up for you in the future. But I do want to try to go through these a bit faster. So stay tuned for that. But why Rakan? Why is Rakan still so strong? Well, if you've ever watched the channel, you'll know a ton of reasons why I think that Rakan is really strong. So the main couple of reasons are his versatility. He's a very good blind pick. There aren't that many champions that hard counter him to the extent that he's not going to be able to find a way to win a game if you're pretty strong, because he roams well, he can hard engage and force fights in the early game, and he does scale pretty well with his shielding off of his E, which is really strong. It's a 1.6 ratio, goes down to a 12-second cooldown, and it has a really high base amount too of 140, which doesn't sound like a lot, but remember he applies it twice. So it's a base 280 shield with a 1.6 ratio that also gives him 2 different jumps. So it's mobility, it's a high shield, and it has high scaling. So that's going to be really strong. And then of course his ultimate is a really unique engage tool, because it can either be relatively quick or it can be delayed. So the fact that you can use that R to gap close onto people as well, because you get that extra movement speed for like, you can take up to maybe 3.5 seconds and then use your W and still hit them with it. Or you can use your R to run up to a fight and then shield somebody, which will also charm a melee champ that's on them and then knock them up with your W. There are a lot of different combinations you can do with this ultimate. So it is an engage, like a Nautilus, like a Leona, but it's also more versatile than that, because it gives you the movement speed, and because it's up for so long that you have a lot of different options where you can use that mobility to sort of maximize the outcome of the fight. So he has a really nice kit, lots of mobility. It's very difficult to gank him. He can also get really deep wards in the enemy jungle, because if anyone ever comes and finds him, usually he can get out of it with his W and then Eing back to an ally if he has to. So he has really good vision pressure, really good roaming, really good safety in the lane in terms of evading ganks. Then he has really good itemization as well. So the fact that he can get Shirelias is such a huge item, even though it's been nerfed. It's still going to be very, very strong, with all these bruiser champions out there, right? Like your Dariuses, your Garens, and then stuff like Viego, Hecarim. There are just so many meatball champs out there right now that just love that movement speed. It's just always going to be strong, whether it's engage or disengage or whatever. It's great. And the fact that he can apply these shields to multiple people as well. So he can shield somebody with his E to speed them up, and then he can shield another person to speed them up. So he really uses that motivate passive he gets a lot of value out of that. And he really likes movement speed as well, right? Because it gives you more surface area you can cover with his ultimate, more gap closing, more moving around, all that stuff. So he personally likes movement speed. A lot of people in the meta right now like movement speed, and he leverages all those stats super well. The ability power, health, ability haste, even the mana regen, it's all excellent on him. So champions like a Leona, like a Nautilus, can't really comfortably get Shirelias a lot of the time. Sort of, but they just may not use the AP that well. They may not need the mana regen. And most of all, it's going to make them too squishy. But with Rakan, because you have so much mobility, you don't want to stick around in a fight and keep getting hit. You can go in with your W and then get back out really quickly with your shield, so hopefully you're not taking too much damage in the process. And that's really where a huge part of his itemization and the strength of it lies, is that you don't have to itemize for really heavy defensive items. You can get these utility items like Shirelias, like Putrifire, like Ardent Censer, and still be very effective, as long as they don't have too much CC. That's really his biggest weakness, is if they have point-click CC and they lock you down, you know, Leona gets a hold of you, or Vhagar throws up a cage, or whatever, then it's going to be a problem. So you're going to have to think about how you want to deal with that if they have a lot of CC and you still want to play Rakan. Whether it's Mercury Treads, or maybe having to switch your runes over to Legend Tenacity, or something like that. If it's a slow type of effect, you know, maybe you could use a Mikhail's or something. So there are ways around it, but that is really his toughest situation, is where they have a lot of CC that's going to be very difficult for you to dodge. But otherwise, I think he's going to be excellent. Shirley's is good. The last one that I just mentioned that I think is huge on him is the Putrifire, because, again, I believe this is the best anti-healing item in the game, just because it's so cheap. It's only 2,300 gold to complete it. Its stats are very good, 55 AP, ability haste, all that stuff. So it's already like 100% efficient. And it's 60% just off of healing or shielding somebody, which can trigger off of your E, but can also trigger whenever you put Font of Life on somebody. Okay, Daddy's working real quick, okay? Can we play in just a minute?
No, I'm just doing some scientist.
Okay, go ahead.
I made some scientist.
Okay, go ahead. So with Font of Life, whenever you CC somebody, either with your ult or with your W, it's going to put that debuff on them to where if anyone auto attacks them, I think it's for like 6 seconds, then they get a heal. That heal doesn't count as lifesteal for them. It counts as a heal coming from you. So that triggers the Putrifire. So basically, whenever you go in, you engage on somebody with your R plus W, everyone on your team auto attacks them at least once, then they're all going to get that buff of that 60% grievous wounds. So you can really easily spread this around. Okay, thank you. You can very easily spread that around to the entire team. And if someone keeps auto-attacking and keeps healing, it's going to refresh that buff over and over and over again. So he's one of the best Putrifire users out there as well. So just really good itemization between Shirelia's, Putrifire. If you want Ardent Censer or some other types of utility items, Redemption or whatever, he can usually fit those into his build. So I think he's going to be really strong. Most of the time you want to do just Guardian. Gives you a lot of extra protection for you and your ally. Font of Life for the reasons I just described. Excellent with Putrifire, excellent with Ardent Censer. And then you can kind of choose in this tree what you want depending on the situation. Second Wind against Poke champs. Bone Plating against all-in champs like Leona or Nautilus. And then Conditioning if you just want to scale up for late game. And then in this one, Unflinching, obviously, if they have a lot of CC is good. I think Revitalize is great if you think you might get something like a Redemption somewhere in your build. And then Overgrowth is pretty good if you think they might have a decent chunk of burst damage. You just want that extra couple hundred health in the mid-game. Can be helpful. I would personally go for Ultimate Hunter as second. In a lot of situations, your ult is just so powerful. I would try to get that cooldown as low as possible. And then Zombie Ward is where I would go these days. Sorry, I'm going to close that. You guys might be able to hear that. It's way too loud. Okay. You gotta do that in a second. Rory, honey, Daddy's trying to... Honey, can you please keep her in here? I'm trying to record. Okay, sorry about that. It's they were just being quiet and, you know, behaving when I was trying to make a video. She just wants to play, I know, but I have to do these videos every now and then. And then my wife's in there painting, rocking out Star Trek at like 500% volume. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but hopefully this is okay. A lot of times I'll try to record this stuff at night just because it can just turn into this crazy place during the day. But this is kind of the only time I have to do it, and I want to get this video out for you guys. So anyways, Rakan really strong. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay. Next champ, Sona. So Sona's kind of a new champ to the lineup. She has been powering up. I had her in like B tier for a while, but just the way that she has been buffed in that last patch with kind of the mini rework, and also the fact that Moonstone is extremely strong right now, and that assassins like Fizz, like Zed, like Talon, all of those keep getting hit, and those are the strongest counter picks to her, and more people are going towards these, 5v5 teamfight champs, because the assassins and some of these, other diver type of champs have been nerfed, then that is going to bring her power level up. So I think you still want Moonstone on her. She is really good with Shirelius as well, but that Moonstone buff was really, really strong on certain champs. Up to 35% extra plus healing and shielding is obviously going to be really impactful. And then I think still just going Guardian, and I would heavily consider, if they have a lot of divers, even going Barrier over something like Exhaust, just to make sure you don't get blown out. Because the thing about Exhaust is it doesn't stop true damage. So if they have Ignite or any other form of true damage in their kit, and a lot of champions do have access to some kind of true damage, it's not going to stop that. And Exhaust only works if you're really close to somebody, right? So that only works if you're able to walk up to like 400 range or something in Exhaust. So against like melee divers, maybe that works. But Barrier is going to protect you against ranged stuff too. So if they're about to hit you, with a Jinx rocket, or I guess it would not stop a Draven ult if you're under the execution threshold, but it would stop some of the base damage. So just any of that long range stuff, it's going to be easier to protect yourself. And it's on a lower cooldown. I think it's like a 60-second less cooldown. I think it's 180 instead of 240. I might be a little off about that. Maybe it's 210 instead of 240. Either way, it's a shorter cooldown. And Barrier scales with plus healing and shielding, so people forget about that. So if you have Moonstone or any other plus healing or shielding in your kit, your Barrier is going to be even more effective. The downside, of course, to something like Barrier is that it doesn't help your allies at all. So it's kind of a greedy item. But if you just stay alive and you're just able to keep spamming, all of your auras, you're probably going to win the fight anyways. So that's why I'm a huge fan of Barrier instead of Exhaust in a lot of situations. Even if, your allies may not be too happy about that, I think that could be the best situation. Heal is another one that can be pretty good as well. If your ADC wants to take something like Exhaust or like Bear or whatever, you can take Heal, because Heal will scale with the plus healing and shielding and all that stuff. Okay. Yeah, Guardian plus either Heal or Barrier would be my recommendations. Font, because you can do Putrifire, which is really strong. Just explained that a second ago with Rakan. And then you can kind of decide if you want Bone Plating or whatever from this tree. But I would definitely take Revitalize. That rune is going to be really OP with her kit, and especially with Moonstone. Now, as far as secondaries go, I think that Presence of Mind is actually really interesting, because you can have some mana problems early. You could take Mana Flow Band as well, but what else are you going to take in that tree? I mean, I guess you could do Absolute Focus, or you could do Scorch, but neither one of those is really particularly awesome. Presence is going to give you that extra sort of mana regen early, and give you that refreshment, extra mana back in when you're in mid to late game team fights. So that could be pretty good. Cut downs, like, okay, I guess if you want to do a little bit more poke in the early game. That's popular. I could also see a world where you just get something like Biscuits plus free boots, so that helps you get to like your second item faster. But yeah, that's basically it for Sona. I mean, a lot of her kit's pretty self-explanatory. It's very easy. The only skill shot is your R. Just try to hit people with your R. Otherwise, just spam your buttons. It is nice if you are able to use your green shot. So the Aria of Perseverance or whatever, the Diminuendo, because it's basically like a little mini exhaust. So anyone that's diving you, if you can hit them with that to reduce their damage by 25% for 3 seconds, that's a pretty big deal. So just trying to hold on to that green cord, or at least just hit somebody with it whenever you're using your auras in a fight, is handy. But realistically, you'll probably win a lot of fights anyways. As long as you don't die and you get off like 2 or 3 W's in a fight, you're going to win. So basically, if it's a 5-second fight and it's you open up with a W, then you get one more W, like maybe 2 seconds in because you have so much ability haste, 2 or 3 seconds in, then you get one more W at like 5 or 6 seconds. It's pretty much lights out. Just it's thousands and thousands of effective healing and shielding every time you press W if you're in a team fight situation. So it's just way too hard to overcome. So that's why, like, her win rate, as you can see, just skyrockets. You know, if she just makes it past that early laning phase and starts to get to the team fights and she gets Moonstone, just pretty much lights out. So either Moonstone plus Redemption, Moonstone plus Putrifire, Moonstone plus Staff of Flowing Water. It really doesn't matter. As you can see, they're all like 65% win rate once you get to 2 items. And remember, these items are very cheap too, right? I guess that's at 3 items. At 2 items, it does look like Staff of Flowing Water is the highest win rate one. Closely followed probably by Redemption. Putrifire actually has the least win rate, which is sort of interesting. But it's still 60%. It's still really good. And all of these items are cheap, right? Like the Moonstone's 2,500. And then actually Shirelia's even has a higher win rate than Moonstone does right now. So it's almost like you can't build the wrong thing on Sona. You have to really go far out of your way to get some super troll items. But if you're just getting normal items, she's just so strong right now because they've just nerfed so much of her opposition. They've buffed so many things that are useful to her. But she's super good. Now Soraka's another one. It's very, very similar, on Soraka, where they did just buff her to where her R removes grievous wounds. Now, I don't know if that just, like, takes Ignite off of them, if it just doesn't do the damage anymore, or if it just doesn't apply grievous wounds, or if it ticks again, if it will continue to apply grievous wounds. I'm not sure how it functions with Ignite. But I do know they get full value out of your R, so it cleanses the grievous wounds and heals for that full amount, which is massive. Because remember, if someone is below 40% health and you do this, they get that bonus, right? So it's like a 525 base at level 16. I guess at level 11 it's 375, but that does not include plus healing and shielding on top of that, or any other modifiers that could go in, like Moonstone, plus healing and shielding, all of that. So very, very good in team fights, really good global pressure. I would personally go for something like Zombie Ward into Ulti Hunter. Your ultimate is so huge because you can use it globally, map wide. It's going to get rid of the grievous wounds and heal people for 1 billion across the entire map. So that's how you roam as Soraka. You just press ult and, you turn around that top one-on-one fight. So I would definitely do Ulti Hunter with her and probably Zombie Ward instead of Gathering Storm. But yeah, it's the same stuff as Sona, just Guardian, Revitalize, probably take Barrier if you want to. You could also take Heal. Now she, I think, definitely wants Moonstone. Sona has some synergy with Shirelia's. I guess Soraka does too. I mean, Soraka's at like 56%, but I would think that Moonstone would be particularly good on her because she has so much healing. That's super strong, and then just taking Redemption second, I think, is probably the right call. It's just so good with Moonstone. Once you get that Moonstone charged up, just like an insane amount of healing. So, yeah, overall, Soraka is still going to be really strong. I would say Soraka's mana costs are a little bit better in the early game, but you have to hit your Qs. So Sona, there is no skill shot, early game. It's just you get in range and press Q, and it just pokes. But with Soraka, if you hit your Qs, it does damage, and it heals you, so it's very good for trading, and it's wave clear. So if you get 2 or 3 points in your Q early, you can just hit that back line with your Q if you want to, and then someone like a Caitlyn or a Sivir can just wave clear the rest of it. So Soraka is going to be, really, really strong on this patch, as long as they don't have a ton of hard dive. Now, if they end up getting something like a Leona or a Nautilus or whatever, you're just going to have to play really far back, hope they don't engage on you, and then get a Mikhail's or something second to cleanse off the CC. But yeah, she's going to be super, super strong right now. Then Lulu, I still think is pretty good overall. The problem why I bumped her down a little bit, and you'll notice she does have a much lower win rate, is because her matchup against Sona and Soraka I don't think is that good, because she just can't keep up with that much plus healing and shielding. A lot of it's going to come down to who is your ADC. Yeah, she only has a 46% win rate, it looks like, against Soraka, and a 44% win rate against Sona. So she's still pretty good against most other champs. It's just those two in particular, just because they have so much more healing, and they scale so much harder with plus healing and shielding than she does. Because remember, Lulu, with her shield, Like, her E, that works with plus healing and shielding, but her ultimate does not, because it's an infusion of health. So it gets no benefit from Moonstone, no benefit from Redemption. So Lulu is much more matchup dependent, or ally dependent, I should say. You really want something like a Jinx or a Twitch, Kog'Maw, just something that's going to hyperscale through the roof and do so much damage that there's no way the Soraka or the Sona can heal through it. But otherwise, it's going to be really, really hard because you can't threaten them in the late game. They're just going to heal through everything. You have no way to engage. It's going to be very difficult for you to CC and lock them down, right? Because you have such short range on your W. You could like flash polymorph or something to Sona, but it's really reaching. It's a very tough situation when you're trying to deal with those two. Unless, again, you have a really fed person that can just kill everyone regardless of healing. So Lulu is still good. It just depends on the situation. Okay, and then moving down to the next tier, I put Leona down just a little bit because, in theory, yes, she is really good. So these are kind of the answers to Sona Soraka, but it's on you to counter them, right? You have to hit the skill shots. You have to pressure early. You have to get it done before 20 to 25 minutes, or Sona and Soraka are just going to close out the game and you're not going to be able to do anything, right? And I have Rakan a little bit higher just because he can he's not going to be able to match their scaling, but he does have some scaling himself. And he just has more tools and ways to get to some of that back line and mess them up. So the fact that he can get grievous wounds, with Putrifire and dive the back line to threaten the Soraka or the Sona, I think puts him just a little bit ahead of stuff like Leona and Nautilus, who, yeah, they can, start fights, but they're going to have a harder time getting, a grievous wound item that is as effective. I think Thornmail is far worse as a grievous wound item than Putrifire, because it's more expensive and it forces you to actually CC the person or for them to hit you. So, anyways, Leona, very good if you can pressure early, if you can really, dig into the Sona or dig into the Soraka, zone them off the wave. You have no sustain, though, so if they do land poke on you, Leona's actually down 2%. Now, and that's because Sona and Soraka got stronger, which is really weird because you would think, like, Leona is a very good counter against those champs. It's like, sort of. But there's a certain point where if she doesn't get it done, if she hasn't killed them like 3 times by 15 minutes, they're just going to outscale her. And there's just nothing she can do at a certain point, right? Once they get like a McHale's or something, or they just stand like 2,000 units back, or just some absurd distance back and just heal people, it's really hard to make it happen. So yeah, she can be pretty strong. You still have Locket, which is good. It's not going to keep up with Moonstone, but it's good against burst damage. And then you've got like Zeke's, which again does help out a little bit with the scaling. But you just really, I would say a lot of times you just want to get Mobies and just go and just try to take over the game. Just sit on mid lane, go with your jungler to invade. Just do something. And Mobies does have a much higher win rate because I think you got to force the action. You have to make it happen if you're against Sona or Soraka. I mean, maybe those two are banned every game. I don't know. But if you're against one of those, it's going to be rough. So, but she is really good at punishing some of these immobile champs that are really far out there if you have someone else that can go with you. So you have like a Leona or a Tristana against like a, Sona, Caitlyn or something. You can murder them in the early game, but you have to go do it. You cannot chill. You have to have no chill if you're playing Leona against those champs. Blitzcrank is another one who's really interesting, and I know some people will be excited to see this. Maybe I can, play Blitzcrank again. But Blitz is interesting in that at any point in the game, if he lands a hook on somebody, they're dead most of the time. It is extremely hard to heal through a Blitzcrank. Like if Leona engages on somebody, and you are playing as Sona, you might be able to deal with that, right? Like if you stand close enough, they'll get the Guardian Shield. You can ultimate to, peel everybody back a little bit and buy you some more time to use your W. You got the Moonstone ticking. You might be able to get through that. You could even get a McHale's and cleanse, the Leona engage. So there are potential answers to that. With Blitz, there's almost no answer that you can do, like, as an enchanter, right? Because he's going to pull you completely out of position. A lot of times it's, like, over a wall or something. It's got a really, really long range on it compared to a lot of other hooks. And it does a hell of a lot of damage, right? It scales extremely well with AP. It has high base damage. And his ultimate silences, so people can't flash out. and it removes all shields. So even if somehow, someone gets blitz hooked and you manage to throw a shield on them with Sona or Soraka, or whatever, you manage to shield him, he's going to break it, and then he's going to blow him up. So that's the thing about Blitzcrank, is his pull is so extreme that they're going to die if he lands it. Now, the bad part about Blitz is, if a tank, soaks that or something, if it's like an Alistar or Leona, or if you just miss, and then the enemy, like, just Shirelias and they all run at you and engage on your team, that's rough. Or if the enemy gets a lot of bubbles. So if they have a lot of Banshee's Veils or Edge of Nights, that's really annoying to deal with as well. Or like Morgana, there are certain things that can be good against him. But he's going to be pretty good against the field right now, especially if these squishy supports start coming back into the meta. And I mean, even if you pull something like a Nautilus or whatever over a wall, they might still die, right? Even if they are tanky, depending on the situation. But yeah, he has a high win rate right now. It's 53%. They did buff something about him a few patches ago. I don't remember what it was exactly. That shield breaking is also pretty good against Sterix or against Locket or any of these other like big shield items that come through sometimes. But looks like it's just Locket, Zeke's. So the items really don't matter. It's just all going to come down to, do you land that hook or not most of the time. But it's just that hook is really, really effective, and there's not much else that is going to be effective against Sona and Soraka right now. So that is primarily why I've moved Blitzcrank up. It's just because you need that extreme right now. You just cannot have any middle ground stuff where you're kind of, trying to hope to have this long fight with them. It's kind of what Braum is. We'll talk about Braum in a second. I really thought about putting Braum down in B tier, but his win rate's actually still pretty decent, and at higher elos he's stronger. But yeah, just the extreme situations with Blitzcrank I think are warranted right now. And then we've got Nautilus, who maybe should go down a little bit lower. It's hard to say. So like Nautilus does have good wave clear with his E. He does have a really thick hitbox with his Q. It can't go over walls, but if you can get open field, it is highly likely you're going to be able to hit somebody with that. So he's very good at zoning people off in the laning phase. He is squishier than a lot of the other tanks. His base armor, I think, is 36 or 37 versus like Leona, Braum, Alistar. All of them are going to have like 44. So there's that. And his W is pretty weak. It's on a long cooldown, and it's just sort of a little dinky shield that doesn't add any extra armor or magic resist. So he's the weakest of kind of the big tanks. But the thing that really sets him apart is that R is so good in team fights. It's a knock-up. It can't be dodged. You can only like hourglass it or shield, like Morgana Black shield it or something. But it's really, really hard to get around that. It knocks up multiple people. And the fact that it is a knock-up is extremely good with stuff like Yasuo or Samira. There are a lot of champs that interact favorably with knock-ups. So that does put him in a pretty interesting position. So that hook can't go through walls. I mentioned that. That's one of the biggest drawbacks, is it has to be open field. You can't get a lot of these sneaky hooks that someone like a Thresh or a Pike or a Blitzcrank might be able to get. But he's still, like, pretty decent. And the E is actually good wave clear. I don't remember if I mentioned that yet or not. But the E is good wave clear for a tank. So he has some of the best wave clear if you're looking to push in with like Nautilus plus Sivir and then go contest Dragon or go get some deep wards or whatever. He does that really well. But it does cost quite a bit of mana, so you got to be careful doing that too much. Okay, and then Pike is one of the highest risers on here. Now, his win rate is not like that high. I just looked at it in the patch notes. It's like 49%. But I do think there's a lot of potential with Pike. Very similar to Blitzcrank. You kind of want something that's going to be extreme, that's going to be able to pull the Sona and the Soraka really far out of position. And if you hit them with the Pike hook and then you get the stun on them, that's probably enough to kill them, depending on how much damage other people do. Because you can't cleanse that hook, really, right? It's just going to pull you so far back. That's going to be difficult to deal with. Now, the problem with Pike, though, is what's always a problem with damage champions is that your damage item choices are just kind of bad right now. However, the big one is they just buffed Umbral. And I think this item is so good on Pike because he has such great vision control to begin with, right? Because he can get mobility boots. He's really fast with his W and sort of zipping around the map. He can even get deep into the enemy jungle while invisible, and drop a bunch of, good wards on their camps. And now he basically gets a sweeper that you can rush that first item, which I would recommend it. And if you go with zombie ward with that, then you just get a ton of value, a ton of extra vision in the early game. It's going to open up ganks, so your jungler can gank a lot more. The enemy's going to have to be a lot more scared. And it's going to open up roams. It's going to open up dragons. Like, there's just so much that's going to happen when you just darken the map. I mean, even just running past mid lane when your Umbral is up and just sweeping for wards, is just going to be tremendous. Because I think that Umbral stays up for like 6 seconds no matter what, right? And just single attack to kill a ward too is crazy, especially, with all the mobility that he has. Now, I will say that when you go invisible with your W, it does not trigger Umbral. Okay, so you got to be careful about that. I'm like 90% sure it doesn't, because the ward doesn't see you. It has to be a ward that sees you, and then it gets revealed. And it's only a 45-second cooldown. I think Sweeper's like 90 seconds. And you can have this and Sweeper. So he's really the king of vision control right now. Certainly up there with like Maokai for different reasons. But yeah, it's really, really strong, and they just lowered the cost on it by 200. They lowered the lethality by like 2. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, the big attraction on this one, lethality is good, but the big attraction is the ward control, and the fact that this is 200 gold cheaper is massive, because now it's even cheaper than the first mythic from a lot of other champions. So it's very good, but you do have to do something with that power, right? With all that vision gone, you have to make plays. You have to get kills, right? Or you're just not going to be able to afford anything, and your power is going to fall off really hard late game. Once people get a lot more health in general, it's going to be increasingly difficult to execute them if you don't get a lot of AD to match their health gain. So, anyways, I think that he does have the potential to be pretty strong right now, but just like the other champs I just talked about, you got to get ahead, you got to be strong, but I think he's going to be one of the better sleeper champs, especially like Platinum and lower, if you're really good on him, because I think he probably has a good matchup if you're skilled on him versus Sona and Soraka, but you got to close before 25. If they get, 2 items and you just can't really get them because they're hanging out too far on the back line, it's just going to be way too hard to kill anybody. Okay, and then Braum is another one. I did have Braum up in S tier before, but the main reason that I did not like Braum in years past in solo queue is kind of coming up again, is because the enchanters are just too strong. Because he wants to have clean 5v5 team fights, and the thing is, Sona and Soraka are just going to do it better. They're just going to put out way more effective healing and shielding than he does, and he has very limited ways to threaten them on the back line. He can't engage super easily. Yes, he can R or even flash R or whatever, but it's reaching, right? It's not going to be consistent. It's not going to be available all the time. So he's all right, but you better really take advantage of it. Another reason I had him higher was I was hoping that maybe Lucian would be a little bit more viable with those buffs, but he's still pretty bad. He's like at 47 or 48%. So again, he's all right, but you're just going to get absolutely blasted by the Sonas and the Sorakas or even Lulu if you go to late game. But he is pretty good against the other tanks. So that's why he's really good in pro. Against stuff like a Nautilus, like a Leona, he can jump in there, throw up his shield, and protect against engages, and then he's going to dominate team fights while still having a lot of health, a lot of vision control because of his tankiness. It's really hard to pick him off, and that's why people like it in pro, and that's why people don't play things like Sona and Soraka in pro, is because they're so squishy. They can be picked off in the late game. It's really hard to get vision control because if you face check a brush, you're gonna die if somebody's there, versus with Braum, you can do that. You can face check a brush sometimes if you have allies sort of around to back you up, and it's just harder to pick you off. And you're not going to get as much gold to snowball to get to 2 or 3 items, right? In a pro game, you're going to get like 1.5 items. And Braum works much better with fewer items than someone like a Sona or a Soraka does. So, really good. S+, probably in pro, challenger, but in low diamond or lower, he's at least an A, and realistically, he might be down to a B. But his win rate's still like okay. It's like 50 or 51%. Okay, last few, and then we'll call it a day. Nami is still okay. They did buff her last patch, which is pretty good, but Lucian not being as good potentially as I thought he was going to be did bring her down a bit. and then she just gets worked by these other enchanters, kind of like with Lulu. She just doesn't have the plus healing and shielding. All she has is her W, right? So she's not going to be able to keep up with Moonstone, Redemption, Soraka. It's just going to be over. So it's on you to try to pressure, and she can't do that consistently. Like early game, yeah, if you can hit some bubbles on them, it's good. You're not going to be able to poke those two out. They're just going to heal through whatever you're doing, probably. So it's on you to land bubbles early and try to kill her. Outside of the landing phase, you're not going to probably get in range for a bubble. You can R and maybe hit them, but it moves so slowly, they're probably just going to be able to dodge it, right? So it's just that style of fighting where you want sort of skirmishing and maybe, poke and a little bit of early game pressure. They're just going to do it a lot better. Or they're just going to be resilient enough where they're going to be able to survive the laning phase and then outscale you later. So she's okay. It's just, the Sona Soraka, even Lulu, like not threatening Lulu enough early when she has Kog'Maw or Twitch or whatever with her is going to be a real problem later. So she's okay. All right, last few here. Thresh I've got down in B. He did get another nerf on this patch, and he has an early game powerhouse if you land your, flash flay, your hooks and all this. But you're working so hard to try to pressure early, and you have to hit so many skill shots, and you just have to be so good that it's just a lot of people just can't do it because, again, just like a lot of these other champs, if it gets to 2 items, 20 to 25 minutes, and Sona and Soraka are still around in the game's even remotely close, within 5,000 gold or something, you're probably going to lose because you can't threaten them. They're going to hang out so far in the back. The hook is going to be very difficult to land, and even if you hit one of their allies, it's not going to do enough upfront damage, probably, to close out. And they can even get, like, Mikhail's is particularly good against Thresh in the early game, or, like, in the later game, because they can just Mikhail's the hook, because it doesn't immediately displace them, right? Like, a Blitzcrank will immediately, pull them out of the situation, or Pike hook will pull them out of the situation. Thresh hits them, it's got a little bit of a delay on it, and then they can just cleanse it off if they want to. Or they can wait until you use the ult and then cleanse like the ult slow so people can run away, with Mikhail's. And Mikhail's is not that far out of the way, right? If you just get Moonstone and then you get Mikhail's second, the Mikhail still has plus 20% healing and shielding, so that buffs up the Moonstone even more. So it's like Moonstone, or like Mikhail's is not even that much of an opportunity cost over something like a Redemption or Staff of Flowing Water or whatever. It's a little bit, worse in some situations, but I don't know. I just think he just gets destroyed by enchanters late game if you don't, completely crush him in the first 20 minutes. And I just think it's harder to completely crush him with Thresh than it is like a Leona or a Blitzcrank. Rel, she's alright. She is good against other tanks. Just like I keep saying, though, really hard time shutting up the Soraka and the Sona. I think they're just going to run all over her late game. Very, very good against Rakan, though, because, basically you just press, I think it's E, and then you just do, that little AoE stun. If he gets in close enough, this kind of ruins his day. So, pretty good against Rakan. Good against some big shield champions who rely really heavily on shielding. So, Sterix champs or Set or, those types of things. Like, her Q can be very good against that. Q is really good against shield bow. So there's some highlights, she can be really good, but I just feel like in general, she's closer range. She doesn't have a long range hook or anything. She has to run up into melee, and that can work, but I just feel like there's almost too much counterplay. She does have a pretty good win rate for a tank right now, 51 compared to Leona was at 49. I think Nautilus is probably at 50 or something. It's not bad. So that's a little higher than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be 49, so I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit more to it. Maybe people that play Rel in general specialize in her more than some of the other champs. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but she's okay. But I think that she can have problems. All right, last couple here. I'll say Yuumi in general. I did actually move Yuumi down just because her direct competition with Sona and Soraka are so much stronger than she is that I just feel like I'd just rather play them right now. Like, the strength of Yuumi is in the mid to late game, you can attach to a tanky champion, and you're really hard to assassinate. That's the strength, okay? So she still has that. That's still good. Yes, if they have, you know, a 10-0 Talon, Yuumi is going to be better into that type of thing. If she can attach to your 5-0 Darius, right, then something like a Sona or a Soraka. But the thing is, they keep nerfing those champs. They keep nerfing Talon and Fizz and Zed and all of these other diver champs. So it's unlikely they're going to snowball as hard in the early game and come dive you later, as maybe it has been in the past. And the fact that plus healing and shielding is so strong with the buffed up Moonstone and just how much they've buffed Soraka and Sona. Yes, Yuumi does have a heal, but it's very expensive. It's extremely expensive. So she's not going to be able to use that as much as Sona and Soraka unless she jumps off of her target. And if she jumps off, she's going to be really squishy again, which kind of nullifies the reason you would play her in the first place, potentially. So, and her early game is just pretty bad. I think they buffed her Q a little bit a few patches ago, but I would say that the Soraka and Sona are going to have a much better time healing through any sort of harassment the enemy might have, and they're going to be able to put out more harassment themselves than Yuumi. Yuumi does still have the benefit of Ionian boots, or like not having to buy those boots, so she saves 950 gold, so that's good. So she does have some highlights, you know, to her, but I just feel like the Sona and Soraka are just going to be way better, and that's kind of reflected in the win rates. I mean, what's her direct matchup with them look like? I'm assuming probably not good. Yeah, so she's got a 48% win rate against Soraka and about a 49% win rate against Sona. So it's not like abysmal, but it's still problematic. And she doesn't have good win rates against things like Thresh and Nautilus, just because if she ever hops off in the laning phase, they can usually get a hold of her. So she does do really well. As you can see, the chart just goes up and up and up, but so do Soraka and Sona. And I just think they're probably going to be a bit more consistent. So I don't know. You could put her up maybe into like A tier. I know people on the channel, there are definitely some people that love Yuumi, so she's cool, but I just think these two outcompete her. Zyra's okay. Like, if you're like gold and lower, Zyra gets a lot better, where people just don't respect your damage and they'll just, you know, face check you in the bush or just let you hit them with ease during the laning phase. But if you don't get those kills early, then you're going to fall behind. Your items are just way too expensive. You know, it's like 3,200 gold for Leandries, 3,000 for Demonic. And you're just going to get outscaled. It's like, yeah, you can get Morellonomicon, but, you know, Sona and Soraka are still just going to outscale you so hard with Moonstone and Redemption and all of these other things. It's just going to be too much. So she's okay. I just think she falls off too hard late game, and she's pretty immobile. She can die to ganks pretty easily. So she's good if you have like all-in champs, like if you have a Tristana or a Draven or something and you can really snowball early, she can be pretty good, but after that I think it gets rough. And that's about it as far as what I'll discuss, I guess. Karma is still like not that great. She just doesn't scale as well as a lot of the other enchanters. She doesn't have any steroids. Like a Lulu, for example, who gives her, you know, when she puts picks on somebody, she gives like 80 extra damage on attack and gives them all this extra attack speed. Same thing with Yuumi, gives the extra attack speed, move speed. Karma doesn't really have that. She does give some movement speed on her shield, but she just doesn't buff up allies enough to justify, you know, playing her over other people, I think. And like her early game pressure is okay, right, if you hit your empowered Qs and things like that, but I still think that just the constant barrage of Sona stuff, you know, Soraka hitting Qs, a lot of these other champs can potentially put up like pretty decent pressure, or just like Lulu, right? Like Lulu's the best sort of counter to her, alternative that I usually talk about, because they both can speed people up, they both have shields, but like if you want the lane pressure, you can just get 3 points in Q with Lulu early. That also gives pretty good wave clear, gives pretty good poke pressure in the early game, and then you can just transition later, you know, into your Whimsy and your shield. I don't recommend to do that all the time, but if that's the reason that you're playing Karma is because you want more poke damage early or you want better wave clear early, you can do that with Lulu. You can do that with Soraka. Get 3 points in Q in the laning phase with Soraka, just Q the backline of minions every time, and that's really good wave clear too, and it's less mana on a shorter cooldown. Well, I don't know about all that, but it's similar. It's very similar. So that's my problem with Karma. She's okay. Nautilus or Maokai has really fallen off. Just like the poke on the seeds is like okay. He got directly nerfed a couple of patches ago. The poke on the seeds is okay, but there's so much sustain right now with the Soraka, the Sona, Gore Drinker, just blood, shield bow, bloodline. There's just so much healing that I just think the poke isn't as meaningful as it used to be. So the AP version is out. And as far as the tank version goes, kind of Braum-itis there, where it's like, it's going to be really hard to disrupt the backline with Maokai. And when you've got stuff like Sona and Soraka operating on the backline, that's a huge problem. So he's okay. Not quite as good as he was. Bard, about the same as always. You know, if you hit good Rs, that's great. You can win the game off of that. If you don't, or if they dash or flash it or whatever, you just don't do a lot. So he probably has an okay win rate. He always has like a decent win rate, but I'm just not totally sold on him. Alistar's lower. He can get to the back line. He can pressure people in the lane. I mean, maybe he should be up in A tier potentially, but he just has like no scaling with any items. So if you don't close out early, it can be a huge problem. But he's all right. You know, stuff like Lux applies good poke. People are going to heal through it in the laning phase. Janna is just, I just would not play Janna. All these other champs have been buffed so much. Her cooldowns are just horrible. Early game, it's like 18 seconds on her shield. She has no way to engage. If her shield breaks, they don't get the bonus AD anymore. Her ultimate's like on a 150 second cooldown. Just like absurd numbers, right? Where like Lulu's is like 110 seconds, 120 seconds. Sona's is probably like 130 seconds. And you can use those like much more active situations. So Janna's just, her kits and like the costs and stuff is really just kind of outdated. They really need to give her some buffs to make her into like a premier peeler champ again. And even then, she would still have bad matchups into these, I think. I did nudge Trundle down a little bit. They did nerf his pillars. He's still, like, okay against tanks, but again, I'm expecting to see a little bit less of the Leona and Nautilus and more of these three. So he's not nearly as good against them, but he could still be good in certain situations. Taric, kind of in the Braum scenario. Good team fighter tank that just gets outscaled. Vhagar, you know, the cage can be helpful, but you know, not really that impressive. Cute pocket counter pick to stuff like Rakan, but other than that, I don't know. And then Zillion, final one that I'll mention here. He's okay. I get asked about Zillion on a regular basis. It's like the bombs aren't going to matter in the laning phase. They're just going to sustain through them. If you double bomb, yes, that is a good piece of CC, which is cool. You can manipulate movement speed really well by speeding people up or slowing other people down, so that's nice. And you do have some really good anti-assassination tech with your R, right? But as I've been talking about the entire video, the assassins have already been nerfed to hell. And I feel like you're just going to have a really bad matchup into Sona and Soraka. It's like, okay, you can save your ally. That just extends fights. It's going to make the fight go on for another 5 or 10 seconds. And any fight that's going longer than like 5 seconds, these two are going to win. So you want short, fast, decisive fights, or you want skirmishing where you never group up and fight, where you have split pushers or something. You do not want to face Sona and Soraka in a 5v5 team fight that's going to last, you know, more than 5 seconds late game, or you just lose. That's my opinion on it. So Zillion does still have like a pretty good win rate, not a huge play rate, so he's okay. It's not like he's horrible. Again, I just think the matchups against those champs are probably bad. It's not as bad as I suspected, honestly. The Soraka is about 50%. I don't know where Sona is on here, so maybe there's some kind of magic that... The Sona matchup is awful, though. He's got a 43% win rate against Sona, so I'm not sure why he's so much better against Soraka than Sona. I mean, it is a pretty low sample size. It's like 700 games, because no one plays Zillion, so it's hard to get a good read on the stats, but either way, you can play him if you want to play him, but I think there are probably better choices. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Go by, check out the patch notes if you're interested in that. I just released those, or I will have released them by earlier today, and I'll probably release some ADC tier list probably tomorrow, so check that out. Check out the stream as well, starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time, every night, midnight, usually till about 3 a.m. on Twitch, only Twitch, no more YouTube streaming for now, so check that out. Be sure to follow me if you're interested on Twitter at TheStrapProf. I do announcements whenever I release new videos, whenever I'm streaming. I don't flood your feed with all kinds of random crap like the lunch that I had today or just random political opinions or anything like that. It's strictly just whenever I release new content or if I miss a stream or something. You know, if something comes up, I'll explain why and put that on there. So it's just stuff that's directly relevant to the content on the channel without all the extra junk that you might get with some other Twitter accounts. So, you know, be sure to check that out if you want some more announcements for the channel. But anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day, and we'll see everybody next time.